Toronto Catholic school teacher brags about teaching middle schoolers about gay and transgender issues. Given their own track record of exposing kids to homosexual acts, is it any surprise that the Toronto Catholic Church has nothing to say about the issue? I'm Dr. Duke, and she's Katie. This is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're discussing a California public library in the spotlight after a porn video was secretly recorded during normal business hours. Plus, a startling report out of Sweden finds that the number of young girls claiming to be transgender has surged by 1,500% in the last 10 years. But we start in Toronto, where a Catholic teacher is boasting about LGBT books that he is using in the classroom. And before we jump into all of those stories, I have an update on a story from yesterday. Those of you who watched the program yesterday may remember we did a segment about an African-American girl at the University of Virginia who actually stood up in the new Multicultural Center and after it had been open for about 4 days and made a polite announcement, she was very polite about it, that all you white people in here probably ought not to be here, that this is a safe space for African Americans. It's a brand new spanking building, which some of all the kids' tuition money went to pay for, not just the black kids, were told that, maybe you shouldn't be here.
Excuse me, if y'all didn't know, this is the MSC, and frankly, there's just too many white people in here, and this is a space for people of color. So just be really cognizant of the space that you're taking up, because it does make some of us POCs uncomfortable when we see too many white people in here. It's only been open for 4 days, and frankly, there's the whole university for a lot of y'all to be at, and there's very few spaces for us. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
So I gave a rather scathing condemnation of this kind of overt racism. And yet, within 24 hours, over at the Blaze, we have a situation where somebody went to campus and took a microphone at University of Virginia and already in 24 hours began asking kids what they thought about what this black female student said. And it is staggering to me. Here are some of the responses.
It is a space where students of color go to be comfortable and to feel safe and supported. And when there's white students that are in there doing something that could be perceived as disrespectful, you have to understand that could be hurtful.
I think white people need to be aware of the fact that it's not a space for them and make sure that when they're entering their space or that space, they're not taking up the space for other people of color that want to use it.
This is a multicultural space and it doesn't look multicultural, then the multicultural people at UVA feel less comfortable here.
I think that as a white person, I don't want to say that I should be allowed anywhere, and I think it should be up to those organizations to decide.
And what gets me is it's worse than you think it is. It's one thing for the African-American kid to get up there and say that, to pretend that this building belongs to her and people of her race, even though everything from the who paid for it to what the chancellor's own description of it is says it's multi-purpose. That bothers you, but we know that these African-American kids have been taught to believe by University of Virginia professors that they are not safe unless they're away from all white people. But to have young white people to have imbibed this this cancerous ideology, and you ask yourself, Katie, these are 20, 21-year-old college kids. That same rhetoric, that same invective being taught to 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds.
Absolutely.
What kind of imbibing are they doing?
We have a whole nother generation that is going through the ringers with this, and it's just going to keep getting worse unless somehow magically we change it.
Well, it's not getting better because our first formal story is about a Toronto Catholic school teacher who brags about teaching middle school kids about transgenderism, homosexuality, basically at every stage undermining Catholic teaching. A Catholic teacher who openly boasts about reading pro-homosexual and pro-transgender books to 5 and 6th grade students, cites the Toronto Catholic School Board, adding, marital and family status, gender expression, and gender identity are prohibited grounds of discrimination. So it's the biggest Catholic school system in all of Canada and one of the biggest in North America. More Catholic kids and more Catholic schools. So this particularly gay teacher, who's a middle school teacher, he actually lobbied and forced the school board to adopt language like this, that we as Catholics won't discriminate, whatever that means, against gender expression or gender identity. That now, he says, because he forced that in there, entitles him, mandates that he teaches 5th and 6th graders about trans and gay issues.
Yeah, his name is Paolo De Bueno, and he's a teacher at Toronto's St. James Catholic School. And he is a very, very active participant on the Twitter. And he tweeted last week about the books that he's reading to his 10 and 11-year-old students. They include Sparkle Boy, The Boy Who Cried Fabulous, A Tale of Two Mommies, and A Tale of Two Daddies. And De Bueno, basically, he's a huge advocate talking about what you just said about the marital and family status, gender expression, gender identity, about it being putting into the code of conduct for the school. And like you also said, there are 91,000 students in that school district, and there's 195 schools. De Bueno, by the way.
De Buono.
De Buono, whatever.
Which means, ironically, the good in Italian.
Isn't that's interesting? He makes $102,000 a year for his activism on the Twitter, which I have a lot more to talk about.
He is a middle school teacher who makes $102,000. I have a PhD, a master's degree. I have 25 years teaching college. My salary comes nowhere near what this clown show is getting taught to teach 5th and 6th graders.
Well, get on your Twitter like he does and start tweeting out every day, multiple times a day. It's a entire LGBT agenda.
Oh, I know.
He actually, his pinned tweet, because on Twitter you do a pinned tweet, which is the very first tweet always, no matter how old it is. His says, "It's okay to be gay, lesbian in a Catholic school. A significant percent of students are. It's not their choice. Homophobia is a safe schools issue. Therefore, if you're a Catholic educator who never talks about homophobia, can you really consider yourself an educational leader?"
No, but you could consider yourself a Catholic. And notice what De Bono's point is. You're not Catholics, you're educators. You're educators who just happen to have made the mistake of teaching in Catholic schools, where if you are teaching in Catholic schools as an educator, you have to subordinate your Catholicism and undercut it. And the thing about this is, and I'm not arguing I need to be paid more. I can't believe teaching 5th and 6th graders gets you $102,000. This guy, De Bono, is a piece of work, right? He is the kind of thing that makes me disgusted with the Catholic Church, right? I was raised Catholic. I find it almost intolerable to imagine participating in the Catholic Church with what's going on with all this stuff. What gets me about this the Catholic Church is so spineless that you can say, this guy could say, right, that it's okay to be gay in a Catholic school. But if another teacher at the school had said it's okay to be white, the Catholic authorities would come cracking down on them. The Catholic Church is cowardly. They absolutely will not stand up for their belief. This is not pluralism. This is not tolerance. You can invite people, even gay people, to teach at your Catholic school, but you've got to toe the line when the teaching openly contradicts Catholic theology, which it's doing here over and over again. Because here's the funny thing, Catholic Church. When a Catholic person is hired, or a Christian person is hired by a public university or a public school, right? They don't get to teach their worldview. They can't say, hey, I'm a Lutheran that was hired by the public school, and we need to make secular, anti-Christian public schools safe for Lutherans. No. You would be hung out to dry. And so the Christian churches and the Catholic churches, they bring all these non-Christians in and give them these formalized platforms in the name of diversity, and they're completely undercutting the faith, teaching Catholic kids that Catholic theology is wrong.
And while you may say, well, it's his Twitter feed, he can put out what he wants on Twitter, he's bragging about what he's doing in his school. That's the point. And on top of that, it goes deeper, because I looked through just a little bit of his Twitter feed, and every day he's putting out history questions as a poll, meaning he wants his students on there to view his Twitter feed to answer the history question, which that part may be innocuous, but he releases the answer every day at 2:30, which means he is doing this for his students
in class time.
During class time. So they are seeing on his Twitter feed what he's doing. One of the things he's doing is he's advocating that next week, by the way, is Pink Shirt Day, and that addresses homophobia. And he says he's going to personally donate $150 as part of this Pink Shirt Day challenge. And he says the $150 is equal to 3 days of strike pay, which to me is interesting that he's noting that. But he says this is only if school administrators use social media to basically advertise for Pink Shirt Day, and he's looking for the administrators specifically because they're the ones who are going to make this.
How about we have Black Armband Day to support all the babies that were murdered? Babies that are, the Catholic Church argues, were human beings who should have been born. I wonder if I wonder if he would support that, number one. And number two, I bet you he would advocate against it, and I'll bet you there's no way in hell this Roman Catholic school would have a day like that. They'll get behind Pink Shirt Day, but they would not get behind that. The Catholic Church just needs to get out of the education business. I get it, Mom and Dad, your kid, is it a little bit safer? Is there a little bit more structure and discipline? Yeah. But is it worth it to send your kids, and this is for all you Christians, is it worth it to send your kids to Christian schools that are public school conforming schools, that see their mission as the social justice mission of the public schools? Why would you pay a lot of money to send your kids to a private Christian school that is actually undoing your faith? Let them go to the public school. And when you send your kids to public schools, you expect they're going to get an anti-faith bias. But when you send them to Christian schools, are they expecting to get this predator masquerading as an educator to little 5th and 6th graders, right? Defying openly church teaching. And thousands of people, thousands of Catholics in this huge diocese have petitioned to get rid of this guy. And the church and the school board will have no comment. They have nothing to say about this, which means you know what that means, right? They are not going to do anything about DeBoner, and they are absolutely not going to listen to the parents who pay all that money to send those kids to these schools.
Since we're talking about DeBoner, let's go to Santa Monica, where Pornhub has a 10-minute porn stunt video they released, and it's showing a young woman who they later identified as Ellie Eilish walking the sidewalks of Santa Monica, exposing herself. And this was included outside of a John Muir Elementary School. So she's exposing herself for a porn stunt. And then she goes into the Ocean Park Library where she actually performed sex acts.
You know, the only reason this is a problem is because she's a straight, cisgendered woman. If this was a drag queen who walked into a library and engaged in a sex act, they'd call all the 5-year-olds, probably from DeBoner's class, to come and sit and watch. What makes this problematic is that he's not a drag queen. It was an actual woman actually performing a heterosexual sex act that's got people some up in arms. This is the same libraries, by the way, who welcome transsexuals to talk to little kids. And so, roll the video, Mike. I mean, she walks right into the library. She seems to even turn to talk to somebody at the front desk. She's got a camera crew behind her, and no one thinks to ask her what she's doing in there.
The video shows a woman exposing herself on Santa Monica streets, even outside John Muir Elementary, then carrying out sex acts inside the Ocean Park Library. Take a look. The woman in the video walks into the library, apparently during business hours, and shoots the video, all while talking about not getting caught.
God forbid a child walked in the library and walked right in on the middle of it. That's my biggest concern.
Why God forbid? Again, these are the same public libraries, again, who are targeting your littlest kids to be read to by creepy guys in girls' clothing, who are, as we've seen over the last 6 months, grabbing their crotches, lifting their skirts up to show underneath, making incredibly suggestive suggestions to 5-year-olds. I mean, it's the middle of a school day. It's the middle of a school day. How many little kids are going to be in that library? Probably not many.
Well, the littlest of the little who aren't in school yet. So
maybe, but again, like I said, the only problem is she made one mistake, right? If she was performing a sex act on a drag queen, this would be promoted by the library itself.
I actually can't deny that. It's a sad reality. Well, let's go across the pond all the way to Sweden, where transgenderism supposedly is growing by 1,500% among girls, and this is in the past 10 years. This is a story that Alex Newman, our very own Alex Newman of the Newman Report, discussed, and I guess the Swedish government's Board of Health and Welfare recently released these numbers stating that 1,500% increase in the number of girls claiming to be transgender.
Yeah, and what that demonstrates to you is that it's all social pressure, right? This has nothing to do with all those poor transgender kids who for thousands and thousands of years have been kept in the deepest, darkest of closets. This is suggestibility. Sweden has one of the most relentless social indoctrination programs in their public schools. What we're doing in Common Core still hasn't gotten anywhere near what Sweden does to their kids. It's one of the first postmodern feminist states, right? And so here's what I would ask. The only way to get around the story, if you got this many girls demanding that they're boys, Could this be, to some degree, a reaction against all the militant feminism that these kids are getting? I mean, this is suggestibility, right? You're taking little kids and you're praising them for their bravery and courage. You're looking down your nose at kids who don't think about gender or don't see the world in gender terms or are comfortable in their bodies. You're making these kids front and center. You're making them the victims. And as we know in postmodern progressive culture, to be a victim is to be a hero.
Now,
right?
You're taking Alex's assessment, but I must tell you what Peter Sulmy, the investigator at the National Board of Health and Welfare, said. What Sweden is saying is, yes, the increase is clear. There's no doubt. However, we do not know what the increase is due to.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do, Peter Salami. Yeah, you do.
Salmi.
Peter Salami. You know. Him and DeBoner can go to the deli together and have a great big foot long. All right?
Well, the government researchers also found, shockingly, that transgenderism is highly correlated with other mental problems, including autism, depression, anxiety disorders, and so on. These confused children are also far more likely to commit suicide, which LGBT extremists and the establishment billionaires behind the movement dishonestly attribute to a lack of acceptance by every single person on the planet. That's Alex's
being
words.
Gender dysphoria, being confused, being messed up and mentally about gender used to be a sickness that we could treat, but now treating those kids is inhuman. And so now, what is the answer to the problem? Give them more psychic baggage. Tell them that their confusion is actually normal and heroic. And guess what's going to keep happening? They're going to keep killing themselves.
Okay, well, let's come back home to Wisconsin, where we have a social worker who's speaking out about gender expansiveness.
We have a Wisconsin school district that has a social worker coming to speak about gender expansiveness, the idea, of course, that only rubes believe in male and female. This is Elmbrook Schools Family. Elmbrook is one of the most conservative places in Milwaukee, right? It's one of the suburbs. It is one of the reddest of red counties, right? And even here, what you have going on is the infiltration. So this is a program by social worker Lynn Dussold, and she presents. It's not happening on school. But on a Saturday, they're renting out a room, right?
At the library.
At the library.
Recently renovated library.
Recently renovated library where you could see porn.
There.
Right? Maybe Elisha, whatever her name is, will show up and get herself undressed here. That's gender expanding, right?
Jeez. And the worst part is it's not just gender expansiveness, it's gender expansiveness in the elementary years, ages 5 to 11.
5 to 11-year-olds, right? Teaching 5-year-olds how their boring old boy-girl stuff has to go. And then for preteens and teens, ages 10 to 18, an LGBTQ for preteens and teens event. This event takes place on the morning of Saturday, February 29th at Pilgrim Park Middle School's recently renovated library. And, you know, all that money we're pouring into the libraries, fewer and fewer books, less and less reading, more and more progressive social events like this and your drag queen story hour.
It's all about the social programming happening at, not just in the fact that this is on middle school grounds in their library. So it's a double whammy, not just a public library, but at a school public library. So they will have the gender expansive children, the elementary years. What does that mean? And how do I support what my child is experiencing when they are presenting differently than the norm, and the norm in quotes. The norm, there's two.
You know, why stop with gender when your little girl comes to you and demands to be a princess, when your little 4-year-old boy spends 2 weeks pretending he's a puppy? Why don't we take that as seriously as the gender complaints of a 4-year-old? Because they're all the same thing, right? When I know a little 4-year-old boy who thinks he's Spider-Man. All his waking day, he's got his Spider-Man pajamas on, he's doing Spider-Man things, he's running around shooting webs at people. And so why don't we take him with the absolute credulity that we take with their gender? Look, this kid's closer to being Spider-Man than he is to being gender confused. But when the 4-year-old, the 3-year-old, who in every other way lives in a world of fantasy and make-believe, the kid who believes in tooth fairies and Santa Claus, the kid who believes that there's a man on the moon, and that Dora the Explorer is a real person he might get to meet, that kid who lives that utterly deluded world, all that's just play nonsense. But when that same kid says, "Mommy, look at me in your high heel shoes," we're immediately programming hormone replacement therapy.
Exactly. I just have a little side note from what I did this weekend. I was with my nephew, 4-year-old, and he believes that he can use the Force like in Star Wars. And so we had an electronic vehicle, and my brother was operating it, but
he thought he was
used
doing
the
it.
Force, and he got that
That's right.
truck to come by him.
Why
So
not?
Why is he not a Jedi?
Let's get him now on the cover of the National Enquirer. He'll be the Uri Geller of his generation, bending spoons.
There we
right?
go.
But this is the thing. I'm really quite serious about this. We still cater to children as children. They have not become rational, abstract thinkers. They believe these things. And all of a sudden, because they pretend to be a different gender or even suggest that they like tromping, most little boys that I know like tromping around in heels, it's because they make a hell of a lot of noise, right? Boom, it makes them taller. It's like they're walking on stilts. It has nothing to do with the idea that one day they'll wear panties and nylons. It's just fun. And in every other way, we allow kids to be kids, except this one. It really is criminal. It's worse than criminal. It's child abuse.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up this Wednesday. If you like the show, please help us keep others educated by sharing this episode with your family and friends on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Parler, or the good old-fashioned electronic mail. Send an owl if you must.
If you're a fan of the show and have a business or really hate our guts but want to make some money, consider advertising with us. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise, freedomproject.com/advertise to learn more. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And until next time, stay kids, my friends.